This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Stand-Up Comedy. Your host and MC, and a real good friend of mine in the business. You'll catch his interview early on in this podcast series. If you get a chance, go back and check it out. One of my oldest friends in the business. He's had huge success on stage over several decades. He's now retired, but we're going to talk about something special. But let me introduce my good friend from Florida, Bruce Smirnoff. Bruce, so good to have you back on the show.
Scotty boy, nice to hear from you.
Yeah, and we were chit-chatting the other day about your new your garden and stuff, and we were just chit-chatting as friends do. And I realized that we're both in that kind of retired level of our lives after I've been in the business, I always say, on the fringe of show business for 40 plus years. How long has it been for you overall?
I started in 1975, so it's almost 50 years.
Wow.
Isn't that unbelievable? That's unbelievable. For me to have accomplished so little in that much time is maybe... It's one of the saddest stories. I don't even know why you should call this show a comedy show, because this is pathetic to hear my story.
No.
Almost 50 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't listen to Bruce. He was one of the most popular road comic. He was a headliner. He played big rooms, small rooms, and had a terrific career. But what's great is...
I'm kidding. Scott, remember, comedy, opposites. So if I were to tell you how successful I was, that's not funny. Tell you that I'm a failure is fun.
I know, but as your friend, I want to support you.
This isn't a suicide hotline, Scott. I'm okay.
Well, one of the guys that my podcast audience has been listening to in a couple of the bonus shows, and I did a great interview with him, is Josh Rosen, who's also from your neighborhood in Florida. He's a terrific young impressionist, getting a lot of popularity for his Trump impression and his Biden impression, but he also does a famous sportscaster. I wasn't aware, Baylor or somebody.
Yeah, his name is Skip Bayless, and I'm not aware of either, but he is very popular sports, because he's not baseball. He's everything but baseball, so I only into that. But yes, Josh is on Twitter now, and he's doing all these little not Twitter. Yeah, Twitter and the other things. I'm not very versed.
I think he's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah.
And he's sharing his impressions with the world, and he's kind of gone the way of social media recognition.
Yes.
But
you're absolutely right.
Let's explain to the audience, though, how did you meet Josh, and what led you to, because I know you've done a lot of mentoring for him and given him a lot of guidance. How did that come about?
Yeah. Well, I saw him down here. There's other than the improvs, there's no comedy clubs down here. It's a sad thing, because I think Florida has between 12 and 15 million people. And yet, other than, I think, like 3 improvs, it's really disjointed. There's nothing, not on the scale of what your club used to be like. And you were just one of dozens of great clubs in California. Well, we don't have that. So he was at some bar in Boca Raton, and I was just going there, like to hang out with comics and pretend that I'm in show business. And everybody bombs at this. It's just a bar. It's like a bar that has comedy night, and they go there for every reason in the world, not for comedy. They just go there. Hey, Joe, want to have a drink? We'll have a drink. And then a comedy show breaks out, and now they can't talk to each other because of all the noise from the comics screaming on the microphone. So it's like the worst atmosphere. People don't want the comedy. Comedy's happening, and yet no one's laughing. So it's like a cluster mess every which way. So, but that particular night, I don't watch the show. I just hang out with the guys outside. I'm hearing laughter. And I go, something's wrong. This is weird. How can there be laughter when no one laughs? And I went in and I saw Josh on stage, and he was, he's a cut above he's got an amazing talent level when you can do these voices. And I mean, he can even do like Elizabeth Warren. And here's a guy who looks like a little bit like Woody Allen-ish.
Oh,
and he's doing Elizabeth Warren. And he looks like, and you see Elizabeth Warren on stage. And that's what a great impressionist can do. They capture the air and the attitude, and it's your eyes play tricks on you, and your ears go along with it. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun working with Josh, and you're absolutely correct. He looks like a very young Woody Allen, kind of that small Jewish frame, but he does have an amazing technique when it comes to the impressions. What's interesting is that you saw him, and saw something special, saw that spark that he had for show business. For myself, I recently I went to the local Punchline, and I was there to see Jim Farrell, who you may remember was an opening act back in the 80s, and he went out of the business. He's a fourth level master sommelier now, internationally known, but he's decided to get back into comedy as he's retiring. And we were doing some stuff together, and I met these three young comics, Morgan Anderson, Raul Gonzo, and James Martin. And these are total unknown locals, but I saw something in them out of like the 12 or 15 acts I had to sit through. And I was able to meet with them and counsel them a little bit. I'm not doing the mentoring that you are, but the reason I thought this was interesting conversation for my listeners is that when people like you and I that have spent 40 plus years in the business, we can tell when somebody's got that spark that could turn into a really strong act. So for me, it was these three young people out of 15 acts. For you, there's this slog of nobody's going up on a bar, and you catch Josh Rosen. What was the conversation like with Josh when you first met him?
Well, he's like he's a little strange, and he's like a bookworm kind of a guy. He's very quiet, and he was like unshaven, idiotic hair, a t-shirt. He had a COVID mask, like dangling, like he went on stage with a COVID mask dangling off his ear. So I could see he's one of these people that has amazing talent, but isn't, he needs somebody, to just whisper in his ear. So I started to look him up, because I had to know whether he was crazy and with talent or just eccentric with talent. So I started Facebooking him, and I see his father, and his father lives down the street from me. His father lives in one of these very successful communities. And the father's he's actually a little younger than me, but the father with the chicks and the pool and the Ferraris and the this and the that. So I go, okay, so he comes from good stock. And then in one of the photos, I see him with Fogel. You remember Peter Fogel, right?
Yeah.
That lunatic.
Peter's been interviewed on the show, and a very successful Jewish-based comic, and he does a terrific one-man show. Yeah.
And so I called Fogel, and I said, what's the story with your friend's son? Is he all here? And he goes, yeah, he's just eccentric. So I called the father, and I said, I want to work with your son, blah, blah, blah. So, it's been like a year. It's like a year. It is. It's exactly a year. And the problem, he's getting just incredible. The problem is there's just still no comedy clubs here. And a lot of guys have moved here from L.A. Jimmy Schubert, a lot of people that you don't know, but Shuby is here. And even with this plethora of great comics down here, no one seem to take advantage of it. The improvs have a big lock, on big name comics, and there's no mid ground. And so that's it. So he's focusing now on the Twitter thing.
Yeah, but still, you saw that lump of coal that could be turned into a diamond, and you realized.
Yeah, well, I was going to get to that. I'll tell you, it's like paying it forward. When I lived in LA, I was like a young kid hanging out at the Friars Club, because I got into that old time show business group, and the Friars Club was in Beverly Hills, and the head guy was Milton Berle. I hope your listeners remember these people. Milton Berle was like the first television superstar, and so I love being around these old time guys. And through my years there, some of them would, take me under their wing. And as much as I liked being around them and looked up to them, they were giving me advice, and I wasn't taking it. It was like, hey, in the inner thought in my head, yeah, thank you very much. I know what I'm doing. Well, obviously, because no one knows who I am, I didn't know what I was doing. And I had I had one of the writers from Sid Caesar's show took me under his wing. Hal Cantor, who wrote Elvis movies and directed Jerry Lewis films and wrote all the jokes for the Academy Awards. I had all these guys, but they were old. They were older men. And when you're a young guy in Hollywood, it's like, yeah, old man, I'm the guy. I'm the new guy. I'm the stud. And they would talk to me, and I was very respectful for them. Don't get me wrong. But I'd say, what's this guy? 80? What does he know? Well, if you look at awards and the Oscars, and I really messed that up. I regret it so much. So I try to pay it forward. And I even tell Josh about all these people. I show it to him on YouTube, who these people were and how they went out of their way to try to help me, and I didn't really listen to them. And I said, so here it is. Here's some advice to you. Not that I'm of that caliber or quality, but I'm just telling you what I've learned. Take it or leave it, but I'm showing you why I do it, and that's why I do it.
Well, I think that's a great story as a background, because anybody over 45 or 50 certainly knows about the Friars Club, Dean Martin, Sinatra, all those guys would hang out there. Milton Berle, the king of comedy back in the day, but we could go on and on.
Milton Berle started in 1948 with his television show, and television was brand new, and television, it would be like the size of a big screen. It looked like a giant piece of furniture, and the screen was only, you'd have to look it up on the internet, but I think the screen was like 5 inches. It was this tiny black and white screen, and everyone would pull up a chair and watch it. And when Milton Berle's show came out, it was post World War II. It's 3 years post World War II. And it was such an innovation that he was responsible for people buying televisions. You bought televisions to watch Milton Berle on Tuesday night. And it's just so amazing and I'm sitting with this guy with blowing smoke rings and the whole thing, sitting next to him. And I wasn't, I loved who he was, and he was really funny, and he would give me tips, but I wasn't in awe of what greatness I was around until I left LA and started to look back on my career.
Well,
it was fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, on the one part, even though you say you didn't pay attention, I think that just through exposure, you must have picked up some tips.
Milton, I learned about, weirdly, I never used to do facial expressions, but he had he had great expressions, and I picked up a few of his facial impressions. But because I look nothing like him, you can't tell the influence. It just looks like mugging, but I'm mugging, thinking of him mugging. But because we look completely different, it was that was something.
Yeah.
What else was I? Oh, I told you the Jeff Ross and Milton Berle story, right? Didn't I, on one of these episodes of your show that no one listens to? Do you remember that story?
Well, go ahead and share it again.
I think it was in 2000, and they're filming it because Jeff became, because Milton was the roast master general of the Friars, and Jeff was really taking over that spot. And Milton Berle was a child actor. I think Milton was born like in 1915, and he was when he was 4 and 5 years old, he was in 2 Charlie Chaplin silent movies. And so here we were, Milton was, while he was cutting a cigar, he was showing Jeff how to cut a cigar, and I'm sitting there watching the taping. And here was America's first television superstar telling us a first-hand account of working with America's first motion picture star. And that was like, that was a real shivers down the spine story, firsthand from one guy about the other guy. And Chaplin, I think, was born in the 1800s. So, and then this was the year 2000. So that was a pretty spectacular story.
And what a great lineage.
Hello? Are you still there? Okay.
No. No, but the lineage, to anybody that understands stand-up comedy, going from Charlie
Right.
Chaplin to Milton Berle to all the other people that you were able to be around.
Jeff Ross. Yeah, Jeff Ross is pretty famous too.
But even Bruce Smirnoff picking up tips and picking up things about comedy. And now you're in, you're your post 60 years and you're sharing.
I'm going to be 66 soon.
Wow. Well, you don't look a day over 65, but anyway, I'm bummed. I
still feel like I'm 38 though. I really do, but I am going to be 66.
Well, but what I was leading up to was, I think it's amazing that you're sharing with Josh Rosen some of the things that you learned over your 40 plus years, and then what you learned from the people before you, who learned from the people before them. I mean, it's an incredible lineage. But I did want to go back to something you mentioned. You actually approached his father first. And Josh isn't a child. He's a grown man. But that's very respectful and interesting. What made you approach him as opposed to Josh direct?
Because I could see that he was really successful. And he probably wanted his kid to be in anything but this. Because I come from a family like that. I had a lot to just walk into, and I turned my back to it. And I could see the same story with Josh, and so I just wanted to get the clearance from the father
and make sure he was supporting of it. Right?
I felt that this kid would need, there would just be some things that he would need, like a microphone, dumb things. And I wanted to see if the father was on board with it, because this kid is like an Uber driver, and it's like, I can't be telling him, you got to have a better microphone for making these videos, things like that. I just want to see if the father was on board. And of course, the father is on board. So we'll see what happens.
So I'm sure you were giving him tips about performance and being a professional, but also it probably went beyond
I don't
that.
have to. No, I don't have to. This kid has got way more talent than I do. I just was giving him tips about performing and think like, he didn't, like, this is what's so strange. And probably if people are listening to this, like, he didn't know whence he came from. You got to know where you came from. You got to know the history of comedy. I'm not saying back to cavemen, but you have to know 20th century comedy. And I sat him down. He didn't know Laurel and Hardy. He didn't know Abbott and Costello. He didn't know anything. And so I made him watch all this stuff. He didn't know I think he vaguely knew who the Three Stooges were, but not really. He only knew like Woody Allen because he looks like him. And then whatever people know in the 1990s to the 2000s. And we would watch Laurel and Hardy, Chaplin, all this stuff. So I showed him these impressionists from the 60s that were on the Ed Sullivan Show and the Tonight Show. And they would come out and they go, "Good evening, I'm so-and-so. Tonight I'm going to do my world of impressions," or however they would introduce themselves. And then they would turn their back. Remember how they would turn their back?
Rich Little used to be the guy I was watching when I was little.
So I said to Josh, "Just try that." And he goes, "That's a great idea." I go, "Well, that's what they all do. Just try it." So the next time he went on stage, he did that. And and again, he's going on after one guy bombing after another. Filthy. I did this to my mother. These comics are so filthy now for no apparent reason. And he gets up there and goes, "Good evening. Welcome to I'm Josh Rosen. I do impressions." Turns his back, turns around, and he's a new character. And these people, like I said, that go to this bar, the last thing they want to do is listen to comedy. They're like cheering him, and he's doing great. So that was part of how we learned. And now he knows about Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello and everybody.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you were able to, what you and I would take for granted, like turning away and then turning back as a character, or shaving and having your hair done, or wearing something a little respectful of the audience. These are some of the basics that you and I would take for granted that maybe some young comic. I'll give you an example. I saw this really talented young lady, Morgan Anderson, and did an interview with her and stuff. And she invited me to one of her shows, and I went to the show, and it was absolutely filthy from beginning to end. And I had a talk with her, and I said, I understand that it's a different time, and I'm an old fart, and you're getting a response from the audience, but I think you're smarter than that. And if you just wrote to your smartness, to your level of brain work, and not dropped F-bombs and other sexual topics right and left, but just, brought material that was funny, clean, and relatable to the audience, you could do so much more. And it was kind of like the turning around thing for the impressionists. It was kind of like, oh, really? Do you think that would work? and it's because they come up in this nightclub, when you're 20, 19 something, 20 something, the audiences have gotten jaded over the years. I was just talking with another entertainer recently about how back in our day, you could do a 3-minute bit or a 5-minute bit as long as it was funny along the way and then had a big payoff. Larry Miller was famous for his 12 stages of drinking, which is like a 20-minute bit, but it's phenomenal. The audiences don't seem to have that patience level. And so the comics feel this need to get to the funny faster. And since they don't have that much funny, they're throwing in F-bombs and dick jokes and references to kind of fill the gap. And I, as a producer, hate that. I want them to.
But that may be the future. Even though it's where we come from, but people want their own signature on things, and this may be the way.
Well, and that could be, to bring the conversation back where we started, Bruce, because I don't want to take up too much of your time today. I think,
thank God.
I think it's amazing that in your retired state that you're taking the time to share knowledge, to share experience, and to help Josh, whether he ends up doing it on social media or on stage, be a better
you know what? Can
performer.
I say one more thing? Okay? In defense of what you just said, if you go see this new movie Elvis, or if you read the biography about Elvis, his Tom, his manager was a carnival guy, and the Colonel Tom Parker, and he managed Elvis the way you would manage a carnival, a dumpy, fly by night carnival with fat, flashy, loud, all the sparkle. So here was Elvis, the greatest gift to the world in every way, shape, and form, being managed by a guy who was like, what carnivals are like. You hit the hammer and they just push a button so the thing doesn't go as high as it should, so you don't win the prize. So it's like a real shifty operator, and he used all those old techniques with a modern entertainer, Elvis, and turned him into the greatest superstar probably of all time. So there you go.
Yeah. So what I guess the lesson there,
so there is something about old time show business that will never go away. But you are right. Kids don't have a real attention span anymore. So I don't know if you could do a Larry Miller 10, 12-minute bit like you could 30 years ago.
Yeah, and as the audiences change, I understand the comics have to change, but I have always, as a producer, I felt like my job was to help the entertainer go to that next step, which in the case of Laughs Unlimited, from there you would possibly go to television. You might get a sitcom. You might, do a Tonight Show appearance. That's what it was like in the 80s and 90s. Nowadays, none of those options are out there, really. So it is a different world as far as where are you going to take it. So you and I were talking about this yesterday. We don't really get how Josh Rosen, as an impressionist, can get famous on social media And yet, as you mentioned, didn't he get something like a couple 100,000 downloads? And he could become a celebrity using his talents on these weird sites as opposed to on stage.
Yes.
It's just bizarre to me. But there are people that are famous from stuff they've done on the internet. And for me, who's an old school stage guy, it's like, well, if you didn't pay your dues on stage, how could you amount to anything? Somebody said, get the hose and squirt the kids. I'm the old guy on the porch.
You really stepped in it in 1980. I mean, for your idea, I mean, you were the first comedy club, and I just remember how excited I was to go on the road. And it was just, in fact, I know I've told you this a million times, but I was going to take the bus from LA because I was scared of flying back then. So I had to leave at like 3 a.m. and I went to the bus terminal in downtown LA. It was such scuzzy people. I said, I'd rather die in a plane crash. So that's how I learned to I broke my fear of flying by working for you and going. Sometimes you have me there, when you had the Citrus Heights Club, 2, 4, 6 times a year. It was just great, get you on the phone, get all my dates at once. It's really terrific. I wish that we could have those days back.
Yeah. I think we lived at a golden time for stand-up.
Golden. And you were smart enough, I don't know how, to figure this out. And you were right there. You were there before anybody on the West Coast. And from you went and helped those people from up, I won't mention any names, but you helped those people in San Jose, and they wound up having more clubs than you. Did they ever thank you for that? Or did
they made millions, and I pounded away on my little club, but I had a good life, and I met people like you, Bruce.
You schooled them, and they learned from you. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's true that even back in the day and up until now, we both feel it's okay to share, pass along what we've learned. I'm doing it with young comics. I'm still producing a few small shows here in Elk Grove. You're doing it by helping Josh and who knows, maybe some other young comics someday.
You did it. You paid it forward. And let me tell you, they just bought their 19th Lear jet because you helped them.
So
they have
I guess
their
I'm the
home
sucker.
built out of solid gold, their home. Everything because of you, and you paid it forward. And now go out onto I-5 and jump in front of a truck as it's coming at 8.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing a little bit of your story about how you've mentored Josh. And I think that for my listening audience, what I wanted to share today is that we are giving back, that we are trying to help the next generation. And even though we don't always understand everything they're doing because of the generation gaps, our hearts are in the right place. And I think we're having an impact. Bruce, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome, Scott.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this short conversation about giving back and the art of stand-up comedy. Next week, we'll have another great show. Hey, thanks for listening. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.